Welcome back to the Expanded Minds podcast. Today, I have a special guest with me, and his name is Fransisco. Fransisco is a founder of Giving Business Soul and the Mortgage Phoenix Group. After undergoing several major life changes over a decade ago, Fransisco was led into the dark night of the soul. This has led to Fransisco's interest in spiritual psychology and other philosophies that would bring healing to not only his soul, but to the souls of those around him. Fransisco has a master's degree in spiritual psychology and has had many successes in business. With the conviction that business is a potent force for positive change, Fransisco now dedicates himself to helping others weave their soul into the fabric of business. This mission, he believes, is more crucial now than ever, as the old paradigms crumble, paving the way for a new era where business intertwines with our shared human experience. Now, to quote Fransisco, "We need leaders in this new renaissance, leaders eager to imprint their legacy of generosity and humanity. Giving Business Soul seeks such visionaries, those bold enough to undergo profound inner transformation and embody their soul's presence with conviction and with open hearts." And so with that being said, welcome on, Fransisco. How's your morning been?
All is well, man. All is well. Just enjoying
It's
the
raining over here.
Yeah, a little Southern California rain to get our weekend started. It's just some crazy weather. I mean, not crazy, but it's been certainly a lot of rain. Not a little unusual, but certainly very useful.
And I see you got like the flow state jacket on. Is that your own merch right there?
It's my own merch. Yeah, I teach a workshop called Flow Workshop, and so I teach about flow states and so forth. And we were kind of playing around with kind of the colleges and so forth. And I thought, yeah, this would be cool. Flow state.
Yeah. Are you the one that finalized that design right there? Just how it's like.
Yeah. Well, a good friend of mine, Jacob Swadek, actually came up with it, and it has like the Giving Business Soul here, But yeah, and then we got the hats. We got some eye masks as well. So when we do breath work and stuff, we put them on. Yeah, I think we're gonna go with it. We're gonna go with it. I think I'm gonna be having a large event in the next probably a few months, and we'll have a bunch of sweaters and the eye mask and hats and all the merch about flow state.
Yeah, let's get into flow state actually. So with flow state, right? Like obviously you're a successful businessman. And so you use that to maximize kind of your results and things, you want things to flow good and things like that. So where does getting into a flow state begin? Like, how do you start to use it and utilize the flow state to maximize your results?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question. So, there's an actual science with it, behind it. And so Steve Kotler was really who popularized it over the last few years. He has a book called The Rise of Superman and Stealing Fire. But the I would say the grandfather of it, if he's the father, the grandfather will be, his name is Csikszentmihalyi. Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi is his name. I think he's a Hungarian guy. He actually used to live here in Claremont, and he recently transitioned about 2 years ago. But there's an actual science behind it, and there's like 4 steps to get into flow state. Like if you're trying to activate it, and the first step is the struggle phase. So you kind of have to do something that's going to be a little bit challenging for you, and that typically pushes out a bunch of cortisol and like the stress hormone in the body. And when you stay with that thing and you commit to it, let's say you're doing a run, like a 3, 4, 5 mile run, that first half a mile, you're in that struggle phase. The inner critic is really loud. It's like, what do we do this for? This is dumb. So you're kind of battling against that inner struggle. But if you just stay committed to it, it's like the body literally listens to that, and it opens up the blood vessels, and it opens up more flow of blood in the system. And then eventually that's the second phase. It's called the release phase. And then all of a sudden you get into the flow state. And flow state has some characteristics. You feel selfless, timeless, effortless, and rich. So you get a good sense of, it's like the prefrontal cortex kind of disappears. You kind of lose sort of a sense of what's you and what's the universe. And, and you just kind of melt into the present moment. It feels timeless, so time distorts itself. 5 minutes feels like a couple hours like 5 minutes, and it feels effortless. It's very easy, and just everything is just moving in the right direction. Everything falls into place, and it feels very rich. So it's an acronym, STIRS, STER. And in the rich zone, it's very creative. You get a lot of pattern recognition, a lot of norepinephrine, these hormones that allow your intelligence to kind of increase, to learn at twice the pace. So once you learn the science of it, it's like you can kind of get yourself into these states, and you learn how to do it. I think as a business person, you got to learn that. Like, you're at a serious disadvantage if you don't understand it, one, and then two, like, how do I like get myself in it day after day after day? Because productivity goes up 500%, creativity goes up 600%. So it's if you want to do well in business and in life, you got to learn how to get yourself in these states. And yeah, there's all sorts of ways to get yourself in. Once you start to study it, I think one of the things that I teach a lot is to wake and flow, to wake and flow. And so, I used to have these very big morning elaborate routines in the morning with breath work and light and earthing, and I still do that, but I do it after I get to work. So when we first wake up, we're in a state that's called flow proneness. Flow proneness. And this is all research coming out of the Flow Research Collective with Steve Kotler and Rian Doris. I'm a student of theirs, or went through their program, and like understanding the full science of this stuff. But when you wake up, you're kind of in a flow state. You just slept 8 hours and it felt like just blink of an eye. So you actually are in a flow state, because you're in the delta and theta state of the brain waves. So the real game is like to literally just wake up and open up your computer and just start working. And when you do that, this is kind of how the billionaires do it, man. They just wake up and work, and all these sort of biohackers are all waking up and having these elaborate routines, but yet the billionaires are all performing. So yeah, I teach how to like just wake up and just do the hardest thing you have to do right out of the gate. Wake up and just get to work. Put those projects that have been challenging, having a hard time completing, systems, books that you need to read, all that kind of stuff, just throw it in the first 90 minutes. And then when you're done, you can go ahead and, go do your breath work, go recharge, ground, do your thing, get some exercise, do your routine that you want to do. So then you can kind of like reactivate it again, if you will. So yeah, that's a big piece of what I teach and what I mentor entrepreneurs to do is how to access these states through these modalities. But I also teach them how to like apply a human technology, a spiritual psychology technology, to actually get yourself into these states where they become permanent, and you don't have to flow hack your way there.
Yeah. So like, what would be an example of like maybe you accidentally hit the flow state and then you start to hone in on it? Like maybe, okay, let me start to go into that struggle phase, and then you start to like hone into it like consciously.
Hmm. Yeah, I think where it gets active, let's say if you go on a trip, you're leaving on a trip somewhere for a couple weeks, and you sort of procrastinated, all the things that you got to do to the day before you leave. So you literally wake up and you're already kind of like, oh damn, I got to get all this shit done, and you're already kind of pumping your system with cortisol. And then all of a sudden it's like you just start going, and all of a sudden everything just starts falling into place, and you're running from one store to this and that and taking care of what you have to take care of. You're accidentally maybe activating that flow state where everything just sort of magically begins to fall into place. But like getting into the ice bath, infrared saunas, because when you're in the infrared sauna, it's like the first 10 minutes might be a struggle, and then all of a sudden, boom, it releases, and then you get into flow and it feels great. So I was getting myself in it, but I just didn't have language for it. I didn't like, I always felt kind of high, if you will, like, man, I feel great, I feel amazing, and but I didn't understand what the heck was going on until I read the literature. and I understood the science, and I was like, oh, that's what I'm experiencing, and so yeah, and I kind of interestingly came across it through obviously reading the books, but I graduated with a master's degree in spiritual psychology in 2012. And so when I understood how to like do inner work, how to properly heal, what I started to understand was that I when you actually go down into your pains and into your traumas, you're dissolving lower energetic emotions that are stuck in the body. There's a great book called The Body Keeps Scores. Our veterans know this very well, but trauma is stuck in the body. And so are our unprocessed, unresolved material. So they stay in the body and they get triggered from time to time, depending on, what's going on in your reality. So if you think about like the map of consciousness, it's a piece of work by David Hawkins, who really kind of brought this to human awareness, and he shows all the human emotions from the lowest to the highest at from a vibrational scale standpoint. So shame is like its rate's very low. I think we all like understand that. It's like it's a very low level emotion. It's very constricted. I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. And these are stuck in our body based on our childhood, and so when you actually understand how to heal, how to use psychological frameworks to go down into those places, you can dissolve the shame. You can bring love to those places, compassion, self-forgiveness, and it literally takes a very low level human emotion, and it dissolves it with love. And
That's the
so
map of consciousness, by the way. I just pulled it
yeah,
up
that's
so
it
people
right
can
there.
see.
Yeah, that's
So
exactly
this
it.
thing.
Yeah. And that's the one that I like, that with that middle one, right? Just go down a little bit more where you were. Yeah, it's actually the one in the
So
top right. Yeah, it's the one that has a towel at the top. The one right underneath that one.
oh shoot.
But yeah, but either way, they're all great. It's the one that's at that one right there. That's the cleanest one, I think. It's really clean. But so you see, shame, it rates at the very lowest there. And this is stuck in your body. It's stuck in your tissue, in the nervous system. That's why soldiers always, they have PTSD, because the trauma's in the body. They're driving past a construction site and they hear the tractors going off, and it reminds them of war. And so then all of a sudden the body activates that. So when you know how to do proper healing, you can bring love and compassion, and you dissolve it with time. And when you dissolve it, it's like an anchor, that's keeping you from rising into your higher aspirations, your higher self, into a greater capacity. And when you dissolve it, you go up, you know. And if you continue to do that, then that's what I call a spiritual technology, human technology, emotional technology, call it what you will. It's a technology, but you got to be willing to go in. You got to understand what the hell I'm talking about. Two, you got to understand, like, conceptualize what you're really doing. This is all based on science. It's not, any woo woo stuff. And when you heal that, your consciousness starts to go up. These states, you don't have to flow hack your way there. You don't have to like go on a run. You don't have to go in the ice bath. You can certainly do that, because what flow, like a flow state, means, when you look it up in the dictionary, it's an optimal state of human consciousness, or the most heightened state of human consciousness, where we feel and perform at our best. So that's Webster's dictionary. So essentially what it's saying is that when we activate a flow state, we're going to that higher part of the map of consciousness. So yeah, you can hack your way there, and you can keep doing that over and over. But the real game is, how do I heal what's stuck in my body, so that I can slowly ascend the ladder of consciousness, so that these higher places become permanent states where you reside, and not where you hack your way to.
Yeah, I want to bring up one thing. Like you talk about, or earlier you mentioned pattern recognition. And I'm gonna try to tie it into what you just said right here too. But in terms of pattern recognition, right? In terms of business, and then looking into your story, it seems like you did a lot of reading in business and different kind of like entrepreneurial books and things like that. so that when opportunities come, you're able to recognize different patterns in order to make like the correct decision. In terms of, I mean, I'll probably tie into like healing trauma. Like there's different, I guess your brain is wired in a certain way, and there's like a pattern that you need to figure out in order to kind of find the missing piece and heal yourself. So like when you start to do that inner work and dive deep into yourself, you're kind of like learning to feel yourself, feel the different traumas, and then trying to get back into your center and, find it, kind of like distinguish what's you and what isn't, and try to put the pieces together and things like that. So they're kind of similar in a sense, but what are your thoughts on just yeah, just like you could say an analogy of like viewing a trauma as a puzzle piece and like trying to
Yeah.
put things together and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of what I mentor on. So I've been, coaching, mentoring, entrepreneurs how to do this. Like one, how to identify, how to process, how to integrate, and how to evolve from the trauma. So there's a very clear framework that I use to do it. You could say it pattern recognition, but I would see it more like what I would call soul recapitulation. Soul recapitulation. So when you say, okay, I'm done with the illusion of the outside world and thinking that something outside of me is going to resolve the void that I feel. I'm done with tactical and strategic things and trying to get to the top of the ladder to think that that's going to heal me. And so when you devote yourself to the internal planes, the soul begins to recapitulate the traumas of your childhood, your first 21 years for the most part. And what I mean by recapitulate, I'll put it to you this way. Let's say that you're born with 100 tokens of consciousness. So you're born in full power. Every time you were traumatized, small or large or however it was, you lose tokens of consciousness. And when you go into the next developmental cycle of your youth, 0 to 7 is your first cycle, 7 to 14 is the second, and then the third is 14 to 21. So if you get traumatized, some physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse at 0 to 7, you lose tokens of consciousness. A part of you gets left behind. And part of you gets stuck in an ego structure because the mind comes in to protect you, to keep you safe and protected, because it's so painful to experience that. And in that wounding, in that winding around of to create a protective mechanism, a part of you gets left behind, tokens. And then you go to the next cycle, and that gets left behind. So then you develop shadows. You develop addictions and allergies per se to things based on those things. And then in 7 to 14, you get some parents get divorced and you lose more tokens. And then 14 to 21, you get a heartbreak, and you're losing tokens along the way. And then you want to live this great life that you feel that you have the capacity to do, and you reach a proverbial door. And on the other side of this door is your greater self, your greater dreams. But the door says 80 tokens of consciousness required. And you only got 50 or 60. So you don't have the consciousness, awareness, or presence to have that door open. You can try to push through, but you're going to get defaulted back. So then you got to go through a reclamation. You got to go and retrieve those tokens. And when you devote yourself, it's like the universe hears you. It says, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to go into my proverbial hell and go deal with my things. So then what happens is that you're going to start to re-encounter triggers, irritations, upsets. And it's the language of God, language of the unconscious. And it will literally bring back similar events to let's say you were bullied in the playground when you were, 10 years old. Now your boss is going to be a bully, and now instead of dealing with it the way that you did when you were 10, where you collapsed and you lost your voice and didn't develop boundaries, you have an opportunity to redo it. to find your voice, to reclaim, that part that you lost. And so what I have people do is to bring me their triggers, bring me your shit, bring me your drama, bring me your irritation. It's the gold is there. And that's how life is trying to speak to you. It's like, so people that are in the spiritual, arena, they want to feel that they're very spiritual, but then they're taking off to, Costa Rica and Bali, and they feel high, but then they go back home for Christmas, and all of a sudden the triggers happen. The upsets with the brother, the shit that they're doing, and it's like that's where the gold is. And when I help people pattern recognize that and say, okay, what's present here? Why is that trigger happening? What's the bullet that just hit you? And when you can develop the framework and say, okay, what's the energetic signature of that bullet that just hit the nervous system, you'll be able to find it in one of those first 21 years, or you'll be able to find it in a projection that you yourself are holding. And projections are how we relate with ourselves, with others, or with God. And essentially, when we're unaware, these ways that we relate with ourselves, others, or God, these projections, is how we see the world. That's why it's called a U inverse. Universe, U inverse. So you're seeing the world through your projections, and all your upsets are your unresolved material that you're just blind to. You can't see it. You have to see it in the mirror. You have to see it in your reality. And when you start to understand these things, and it's like game, life can be a game, because you can. I look for my triggers. I don't run away from them. I want to know what upsets me, because something is locked in consciousness that I have to reconcile, and that's how you keep going to next levels.
Yeah, that's it. It's interesting. I mean, I'm reminded because I mean, I grew up Christian, so there's definitely verses that come to my head when you mention this kind of stuff. So when you talk about, for example, like the woundings and things like that, like having to go back into it, there's one verse that goes like, uh, "Truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it only remains a single seed." Or wait, if it falls to the ground and dies, there remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. It's like when you
Mm-hmm.
bring your mind into those wounds, you're basically planting the seeds for, a bigger harvest. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously the soil would be your unconscious ground. So when you're not in touch with your unconscious, it just remains just as it is. But then once you go deep into the unconscious and go into those woundings, I mean, you bring up the term sacred wounding in your talks and things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you said it right here, but yeah, when you go into those sacred wounds and things like that, it bears a lot of fruit. And also when you talk about the mirror principle, you can kind of go into the story where Jesus and the woman who was a prostitute or whatever, or she kind of was sleeping with people or whatever, and then she was gonna get stoned. But then it's like, oh, unless you committed, or if you're perfect or whatever. I don't know what the exact quote is,
Yeah, like
but
take out the log out of your own eye. Yeah.
yeah, take the log out of your own eye. So like you got to take out the log out of your own eye. And what this actually is, I mean, that's metaphorical, but what this actually pointing to is inner stillness. Like, because if you're gonna see the world as a mirror, for example, right, you have to first learn to still yourself and like calm, like almost have your internal like a calm water, because if you're constantly projecting and judging people, then it's like you create ripples. And so you want to first get to a calm state, and so that you can then consciously choose like how to project things or stuff like that. But I mean, have you gotten to that point where, I mean, you obviously practice consciously like observing your projections and things like that? Has it brought some of it an inner stillness doing that, or like what have you felt after doing that?
Yeah. Yeah. I've been at it for a long time, I feel like I've integrated a lot. What my understanding is that when you end up healing all the stuff from your own life, um, you end up you end up going through your mother's womb and then going into the lineage of your family. And if you're a deep diver, you can begin to heal those things. And if you continue to go, then you get access to the collective suffering of humanity. So this stuff goes very deep. And so I certainly feel the peace beyond human understanding. I even though there's chaos in my life, I am very seldomly moved in that way. I have a deep inner core stability where my lake is like a still lake. Now this is decades of practice, and decades of discipline with my body, with different, sort of spiritual practices. But I'm in the world, I run businesses. And I think as an entrepreneur, when you have developed core stability and have a heightened state of emotional intelligence, it's just a different game. Everyone I mostly see around, and everyone's triggered all the time, emotional. And when you're operating from there, your view of the world isn't very clear, and neither were your decisions. So the idea behind all of this is essentially that, to have equanimity, so that we are not projecting our stuff out into the world. Because, like, even the current state of affairs and all those different things, you're not going to solve any of the issues by going and doing any, like, just going and protesting per se. Like, I understand it, and everyone has a lane that they have to stay in, but the greatest work we can ever do is to reconcile our pains and our trauma so that we don't project them out into the world. And so, yeah, I certainly understand that sense of a still lake and a still pond. I feel like 99% of the time it's kind of the consciousness that I reside in. And certainly I got a lot of things going on. I mean, I do my thing every day, and I work. My work is my worship at this point. I work 80 hours a week, but it's just, this is my life's work. This is my life's purpose. And certainly I also take a very, Christian approach to the way that I do things. But I've studied the great man Yeshua, incorrectly known as Jesus, in Aramaic, in his natural tongue, in his native tongue. And when you take him out of the religion that the Romans, cloaked over this man, the teachings become much more profound. And they're now making their way out into human awareness more and more. And just sort of in time, I think, because the Roman Empire was a very evil entity, and it certainly didn't give us the true teachings. And so when you study what he was here to really reveal, John 14:12 says, like, do as I do, you could do greater works than even I. He came to lay out a blueprint, and that blueprint, I think, is depicted in his life and his journey as a man through the earth. Faced his betrayals, all 5 of them, with compassion, with love, with forgiveness. The resurrection story says he descended into hell on the first day and rose into the heavens on the third. And I like that metaphor a lot, because everyone always focuses on the heavens. No one asks, why was he in hell first? And why was he there for 2.5 days? But it depicts that if you want to ascend into great heights, you must be first willing to descend into great depths. Go face your addictions. Go face your pains. And if you do, you can go higher. But if you're scared of the dark, meaning your pains, you're not going to go very high. And that's okay if that's not what you're here to do in this lifetime. Not everyone is meant to do this work. Not everyone, and it's only those who feel called. But if you feel like you're one of them, the only way up is down. And I think he came to illustrate that, and came to reveal a real path to activate the highest state of consciousness.
Yeah, like in my own life, I was shown like great heights, and like, through like different spiritual ecstasies and things like that. And so in that state, I was also a religious fanatic. So I would be, telling people like, like to repent, you're going to go to hell, to believe in Jesus and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, it's not necessarily wrong to tell people that, but it's like, it's more in a fanatical way that wasn't wise or discerning or anything like that. So when I was doing that, and I was in those great highs and I was telling people like that, I was then humbled when I lost all of that love and light and bliss. and then I was brought into the dark night of the soul where none of that existed, where you just have to learn how to just be. Um, and I've seen in your own life too. I mean, you've gone through the dark night of the soul, so it seems like you kind of you do learn in that state just to learn how to be with yourself, just learn how to just purely be, and in that you kind of cultivate um, just inner stillness and a depth. Yeah, and I guess you could say that's where you kind of get born again, if you will, or like enter
Yeah.
into that womb state. So it's powerful stuff right there.
Yeah, I mean that's it, man. I think I think that the deception of this external world or this matrix was to kind of focus on the light, go there. But the real power is in the womb. It's in the darkness. It's in those trials and tribulations. It's I think we're starting to find, or at least I've found, and that's what I teach other people, is that the great prize is in your suffering. you know it's in your suffering, and as we know, many people who have suffered greatly are our most gracious people. They're those who have the most grace when they're able to heal those tragedies. And so the more suffering you've been dealt, count your blessings, man. You have great potential, and you wouldn't have been dealt those things if you didn't have the power to alchemize them. We're all equal to the task that we're given in consciousness. And I believe that some the people that are in prison, the people that have done really, have had a really hard life, actually have the greatest potential. But again, we've been sort of hoodwinked, and but I think it's all sort of coming out now that the power is in the dark, is in that side of things. And we just got to have the courage to venture in. And once we begin to do that, it's like it's slow. You start to get the confirmation. You start to slowly get the confirmation that, like, okay, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, I'm actually curious about your research with transpersonal or spiritual psychology, and like, what are some people that you research? Like Stan Groff, is that one of them, or like, what are some people that you've looked up to or studied their work?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a little bit of Stanislav Grof. I got a couple of his books. I mean, certainly a pioneer, especially with psychedelics and afterwards holotropic breathing and those kind of things. And I do practice breath work every day. I used to meditate all the time, but I know I just find that breath work is it's a cheat sheet to get to the nirvana state. And but I think a real hero for me is Carl Jung. You know. And I think that if it were not for Carl and his understanding of the unconscious and how it works, I think we'd still be very lost. I think the Catholic Church really tried to hide a lot of our true wisdom when they got rid of the Library of Alexandria and hid everything in the Vatican. And if it were not for Carl Jung being a renowned scholar, and someone who just was reading everything and anything that guys give us frameworks of how this stuff works. I certainly would have been very lost, because I wanted to go into these murky depths. But had I not had Carl's work and spiritual psychology as well, I certainly wouldn't have known how to integrate. Like I had my first like shamanistic experience with plant medicine back in 2011, but I was already at that time going through the master's program. So as I opened up Pandora's box, I actually had tools, you know. It wasn't like I just opened up Pandora's box and all of a sudden all my trauma's coming out and I could see it and I'm aware of it and I don't know what the hell to do with it. And that's why, like, I think that some of the most confused people right now is the psychedelic renaissance happening, or those who have participated in it but don't act, but are still getting triggered everywhere. you know so it's like, yeah, you're aware, you're woken up, but you're still getting triggered everywhere. So that just means that you haven't done the cleanup work. And there is 4 steps in the mechanics. Is first you wake up, then you clean up. This is the descent. You got to go down in there. And then as you start to clean up, you start to grow up. And as you start to grow up, you start to show up. And what I mean by show up, you become somebody with a backbone and an open heart and a conduit of divine will in human form on the earth. You become one with God and on your mission. But in order to do that and get there, it takes a lot of grit, it takes a lot of work to face your dragons. to face those really dark places inside of you. But those are the mechanics. I mean, and ultimately that's what Yeshua taught in the Gnostic understanding of Christianity. It was you got to acquire spiritual knowledge. You got to know that all is love and all is connected, and then you got to heal your wounds. He certainly didn't say just believe in me and all is going to be well. He said do as I do, and go do the work. How can he clean up for you, man? It just doesn't make any sense. I was having this really deep, conversation with Chat. I have Chat 4.0, and you can talk to it. And I have these 2-hour discourses with it, and have it read through all sacred texts, and I just go down some deep, deep rabbit holes. And I was asking Chat, I just said, hey, what are the two basic branches of Christianity? And I knew the answer, but I'm just, peppering it. And he says, well, there's canonical Christianity, which is mainstream Christianity and the 16,000 derivatives of that Christianity. And then there's Gnostic Christianity, right? Gnostic Christianity is simply meaning gnosis or wisdom. And canonical Christian, I said, what are the two paths and what makes them so different? It says, well, canonical Christianity pretty much says that if you believe in Jesus, you'll be saved, you'll have salvation. And Gnostic Christianity says that, that there's these stages and steps to essentially acquire the connection with God and to feel divinity within your body. And I said, well, Chad, I said, if you're the Roman Empire with the desire for control and power and domination, which are the two versions of Christianity what you would have brought to the forefront to control the populace? I said, well, I would have brought out canonical Christianity, certainly, because there's a very simple set of beliefs that you got to believe, and under the understanding that only one man can gain divinity. I said, oh, that's interesting, Chad. With the Gnostic Christianity's understanding that we all have divine power and access to divinity, then would that mean that Gnostic Christianity would have been a threat to the emperor? Because the Romans believed the emperor was sort of the conduit of God. It's like they didn't want the peasants to have that same power. He says, exactly. That would have been a direct threat that anybody can gain access to divinity. And they said, no, we're just, get on your knees and give us the tithing. This man will come back in a few thousand years for you, And so it's very clear now that fake news is not new. They had an agenda, and they did really well with it. They've done really well.
Yeah, but just think the power and the weight of that. It's just dang that, because like if we actually have access to divinity, and you could say infinite intelligence, if you will,
yeah,
and they're keeping us from it, I mean, like that's just straight I would say blasphemous right there. Just the fact that we can, I mean, in business or in other areas of your life, you can access infinite creativity, and you can say do the will of God in those areas, and they block you from it. I mean, that's like that's a lot.
Yeah, well, what else would we suspect from the Roman Empire, right? If you I studied the Roman Empire. I mean, Constantine, who brought out the Holy Bible, he boiled his wife alive. I mean, this man was not a good man. He literally just combined Christianity and paganism and try to keep the empire from crumbling. But it was a ploy. It wasn't like, oh, here, let me give you the purest form of the teaching of this great man. Come on. I mean, it's just like, when you study it, and that's why when I have conversations with people and they're just, maybe one dimension, I'm like, how much of the Roman Empire have you studied? None. How many books have you read outside the Bible? Very little. Well, it's like, then we can't, I can share things with you, but you really got to refrain from really, just be open-minded. And I think feel it with your body. And I think especially feel it now that you're seeing what's unfolding on the earth, and when you start to go into these other understandings of reading Yeshua's teachings outside of religion, then it makes a lot of sense. You're like, oh, this is easy to see now, and but until you really do that, you will fight, sort of tooth and nail to keep the set of belief, because It's very shattering to the consciousness to think of another alternative when you've been ingrained so deeply in one for a long time. I kind of feel like, I mean, think about it. I mean, you go into most Catholic church or Christian church, you still see the great man on the cross. What kind of message is that to our humanity? Like, get the fuck out of line, and this is what happens to you. You know, it's it's
Yeah.
it's it's symbolic. It's like, stay in line, because even the great one got this happening to him. It's a way to manipulate. It's a way to. That's not his message, and it's certainly not. And now I feel like it's time. It's coming out.
Yeah, it's definitely deeply rooted in fear. I mean, just like religion can definitely embed fear in people's minds, and the consequences and the weight of, I mean, you could say an afterlife definitely keeps people chained,
Yeah,
because it's not necessarily, because what happens is that with the fear of religion, right? It's like you create a delusion for people, and then they act in delusion. And with the truth, and if you're a genuine truth seeker, you want to get direct and straight to the point. So in terms of religion, if you want to seek the truth, you want to get straight to the point. Business, you want to get straight to the point. Anything, you just want to get straight to the point. So it's like, I think I love what you said there. Just like, yeah, just like how people are just in delusion and just like not seeing the truth behind all these religions and how they're misinterpreted. Where if you really look into it and you kind of, read the scriptures from, you could say, an unindoctrinated mind, it holds a lot
exactly.
of metaphorical truth and
Yeah,
codes that can be you can use to gain access to wisdom and higher states of consciousness. So
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm always referencing the Bible. So an anomaly to people, because I'm like, I understand, I read it, I quote it, great wisdom, but the standard interpretation and the dogmatic approach is not accurate. And so I kind of always move in sideways inside of people. And then all of a sudden, it's like when I start to reveal these other things, like, oh, okay, that's interesting, yeah, it's an exciting time to be alive. I think we're going to see some massive changes. I also see, very symbolically, like the situation going on in Israel. You know, I think it's part of this sort of great awakening. The situation that's happening at the birthplace of Yeshua. This is essentially the West Bank, where Bethlehem and Jerusalem, and this is the fifth chakra. This is the fifth chakra on the planet. It represents truth, and powers to be want to, kind of create a conflict there. But I think it's deeply, symbolic. I think that consciousness is trying to come to the surface, and it's trying to come through us. And I think the powers
yeah.
to be are trying to keep that place in conflict in order so that this consciousness doesn't rise. That Christic consciousness that he set forth for us.
Yeah, and like coming to a close here, like talk a little bit about your event that's coming up. What are you excited to see? Like what are some of your expectations? Or maybe if you don't have expectations,
Yeah.
what are you just excited about in general?
Well, I mean, this is the fourth Ascension Summit. I used to teach on flow workshops, and I just try to been finding a way to get the message of giving business soul out, in a way that, like, people can really conceptualize it. And I think we finally created the workshop that, it's an all-day event. It's on March 30th. It's a Saturday. It goes from 9 to 4. And essentially, it's really geared for anybody, but it's certainly, I think, the larger thread is inside the entrepreneurial world.
And sorry,
And
quickly, where's it at too? So
it's
people
in
can know.
Rancho Cucamonga, California, here in Southern
Okay.
California, just right in the Inland Empire. And yeah, and so, I kind of feel that, as an entrepreneurial world, we've been kind of going up the wrong mountain. And so the Ascension Summit is really all about, going into the fact that if we want to ascend the right summit, the right mountain, we got to be willing to kind of heal first. And as we heal, then we can properly evolve and heighten our state of being. And I'm writing a book called The Giving Business Soul: The Rebirth of the Merchant. And essentially, I'm bringing back to human awareness an archetype that was lost. Archetypes are very important. They exist in the collective unconscious of our humanity. We have the archetype of the king, the mother, the queen, the warrior, the magician, all these archetypes. But as an entrepreneurial world, we don't have an archetype. So we strive to be like the Jeff Bezos and the Elon Musk, and we suppose that that's got to be the right way because they've scaled to the top of the billions. But so the merchant archetype has been lost. You can't find anything on it, and my book is going to be bringing it back to the human awareness that it can become an internal North Star for us entrepreneurs that want to show up differently. And I've broken open that word through its etymology. Mer means light, comes from the word Merkaba, light, spirit, body. And chant is a devotional song to God, a wordless expression of devotion. So what a merchant is he or she who is devoted to the light, who uses business as a force for good, as a force for God. And this archetype is finding its way back into the human species at a time when business is the new power structure. If you want to see who's got the most amount of power in a society, look for who's got the largest buildings, right? In the beginning of time, the castles were the largest buildings. And at that time, kings and queens held the most power. And then eventually the castles gave way to the churches. And then priests and popes started to direct us. And eventually those gave way to capital state buildings of states and countries. And then politicians and presidents started to govern us. Right now, the largest buildings belong to business. So if you ever want to change a society, you got to find the dominant power structure and influence that. And it's the first time in human history that we don't have to belong to a bloodline to influence the power structure. Why? Because we're all entrepreneurs. We're all a part of the new power structure of business. And if we become soul-centered, we activate this merchant archetype and start to do business for a higher purpose, for profit, but for higher purpose, to do philanthropy, to do the work of humanity. I believe we can get the planet on the right trajectory, but it will require a lot of us. And the Ascension Summit is to inspire that archetype and give a blueprint of how we can get our psychology and our biology right so that our business can have a higher order, a higher reason for existing, and a higher purpose. So that's what the Ascension Summit is. It's an all-day event. It's got a VIP lunch and a nice lunch. We're going to be doing some breath work with the headsets to really go deep and activate some stuff. And we're going to have amazing guest speaker, Annabelle Viscara. And yeah, so it should be a phenomenal event. And, if you're getting this thing if you're listening to this before March 30th, come check it out. There's only about 15, 20 tickets left. It'll probably go out soon. We normally sell out. It's a small venue. It's like 60 people. Keep it small, intimate. And but if you do get it, come on down, see if there's any tickets.
For sure. Well, where can people find you? And yeah.
Yeah. Best place to find me right now is just Instagram, Fransisco.Jara, Jara.33. You can also go to givingbusinesssoul.com, www.givingbusinesssoul.com. You can find the events. You can find my mentorship, the curriculum that we offer called the Round Table, the curriculum that I offer called the Path of the Merchant. And it's all there on the website. And you can go follow some of my content on I'm getting a much better footprint on YouTube here in the next couple months, but right now it's a little slim. I'd say the best right now just to see some of my work would be in Instagram.
For sure. Yeah. Thank you for coming on, man. It's a lot of wisdom, and it was an honor to have you on. So
yeah. Thank you, Ezekiel. Appreciate it, man. Appreciate the platform. Appreciate you tapping me on the shoulder, having the courage to reach out, and a lot of fun. Thank you, bro. Appreciate it, man.